My name's Jordan Anderson. I came from a really good home. My parents always said they loved me, financially okay. I didn't have anything that I would say that would lead to a tumultuous life. I got transferred from regular kind of generic high school to an art school. It was an all ages school, hanging out with people that were significantly older than me. 11 years old, I went to a party with a girl who is 16. I thought it was, really special because the 16-year-old girl's taking me to a party. She introduced me to alcohol. Later on that night, I got so intoxicated that she gave me some cocaine. I felt bigger, faster, stronger. I could immediately bridge the gap between me and other people. And life was really easy. I found this short circuit to life. By the time I was 13, I got expelled from that school for selling drugs. I started selling to, pay for the substances. I remember my dad showed up. I got into the car and sat in the back seat. My dad, who's this really loving, caring person, looked back at me and said, you're worthless. Later in life, I realized what that is. He was scared. His kid's getting expelled. He's selling drugs. He doesn't know the answer. But I think at the moment, I gravitated to that comment and said, I probably am, right? I'm being expelled from school. I've already got this drug addiction. I'm 13 years old. I just kind of ran with it. It evolved really fast. I continued selling drugs, arrested multiple times. It evolved into things like, carrying firearms and being involved with affiliates of organizations. I found myself hanging out with people that were less than I was used to. And every time I passed a certain line, I climatized to it. The water got a little warmer. Then I would devolve a little bit more and a little bit more. I ended up in custody for some pretty serious charges. My mom would come in and visit me. I remember disliking the fact that they came. I felt really powerless over their emotions. So I started going to some meetings. I started memorizing literature, and my mom would come in and I would say things that were recovery-based and tell her how well I'm doing. Don't worry, Mom, I'm gonna keep coming back. It works if you work it. I believed my own BS and she believed my BS, and later on, I got released and I got locked right back up, I think 24 hours later. Nobody came visited me. And I hated them for not coming, and I hated them for coming. My life just devolved. I stopped caring about what people thought about me, bathing at times, ended up homeless. I had a little bit of a knotted beard and street feet. I weighed 90 pounds, strung out on heroin. And I ended up living under this little bridge in the downtown east side. Even when I had a place, my sisters would come and visit me, and they knew I had a drug problem. They would bring me groceries, but I wouldn't let them upstairs. Upstairs in my apartment that looked like I had my life together, I had my own place, there was nothing in it. There was a milk crate and a mirror, and I would just sit there and do drugs on this mirror. That moment pretty much encapsulated what my addiction looked like. It was beneath what I was raised on. When I was a kid, I remember seeing homeless people and thinking to myself, how can that guy be there? How can that guy give up his dignity? How can that person live on the street? Why would they choose this? If I would have seen myself progress from point A to point B, I would have stopped, but it happened so progressively. It happened so slowly that I was able to warm up to the degradation. I remember I'm sitting under this bridge and I'm washing my socks. This dark brown stream came off of these socks that I've been wearing for weeks. I remember thinking to myself, I'm that guy that I used to laugh at when I was in high school, and the guy I used to throw change at that was homeless. A couple hours later, I had a text message from this person named Stefan. They said, can you meet me at the mustard seed? He had lots of money. So when he messaged me to come meet him, I swung the doors open and I walked in and I made a big scene. I did this woo, walking in the door. I saw 50 people sitting in a circle staring at me. And it was a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I could feel these hands on my back. And they walked me to my seat, and I looked behind me and there was no one there. And I just conceded. I didn't know how to get high right. I'm trying to use, and I'm ending up at a meeting. I had listened to speakers and different people in recovery a lot, but I never heard anything. This guy didn't say anything special, but I identified with him. I heard that he had a problem and that he found the solution. In that moment of identification, I conceded to just do whatever was needed in order to change my life. And I gave up, and it was the last day I used. I went to meetings. I opened a bank account with my sponsor. And when I opened this bank account, I realized that I still had some money that hadn't been seized by the police when I was arrested. It triggered me. I really wanted to use. I wanted to go and spend the money because I only had 3 months. And he suggested maybe I spend it and go to treatment. I actually went to a center based around post-traumatic stress coupled with addiction. In my active use, I had some pretty nefarious dealings, some where I was the victim and some where I was the victimizer. Best decision of my life. Any treatment center would have been great, but government wait lists are long, and I didn't have time to wait. When I went there, I got to escape the world. Treatment is nothing special, but I remember I was safe, and it gave me a few extra months, which I think probably saved my life. I graduated treatment. I really gravitated to my sponsor. He took me through the process of the steps, and that's for some people. Some people it's not, but for me, that was this big turning point. I had a really difficult time admitting powerlessness in my life. And it actually says that we admitted past tense that we were powerless. And it's a difficult thing as a adult man that strives to be autonomous, like we all do, to admit that I have no control over an inanimate object. This little thing, this heroin or cocaine or whatever it is destroying my life, and I don't have the power to stop. Once I admitted that, really admitted that, not just said the words, but actually processed that from head to heart, it converted into something else. I did a 4th step. Most people know what those are. It's like an unburdening of the soul almost. I can't speak for others, but for me, when I did it, I got to share about some really horrific moments. I didn't have trauma that caused my addiction, but my addiction caused a significant amount of trauma. And it was probably the first time in my life that I was able to exhale and just be myself. I finished my steps, and shortly after, I had this, it sounds crazy, I had this dream that I was supposed to move to Ontario. I had a year clean at that point, and I called my sponsor. He said, I think we need to talk about this. You just got a year, let's slow down. I called my mom. She said relatively the same thing, but I felt I had to, and I packed up and I moved. As soon as I got here, things took off. I went into a gas station and I asked for a newspaper because I was going to start looking for an apartment. And the gentleman working the gas station said, there's a place open at my apartment building. I got an apartment a couple days later. I applied to school. This is to be an addictions counselor. And I went down and had a meeting with her. When I got there, I had my little key tag from, NA. I had them sitting on the table, and she said, I'm a member too. You can start Friday. I did 2 years there. I ended up eventually getting, degrees as a psychotherapist and an opiate specialist. I got a job at Renaissance Treatment Center in Brooklyn, Ontario. It's a fantastic place. I learned how to be a counselor there. Really amazing team. Really great opportunity to help people, and they just do fantastic work. So in my education and my career, I was progressing there. And then in my personal life, I met this woman, Diana, also in recovery, who ended up marrying. And she had a son, Jackson, who was 5 at the time. We built this little family. When Jackson was 9, his father relapsed. And we sent him to treatment. He got out, and shortly after, Jackson was supposed to go over to his house and didn't answer the phone. And we knew something was wrong, so I took my kid home. and my wife got the owner to go open the door, and he had unfortunately died of a drug overdose. And I remember actually that day, he, probably out of all the times in my addiction, being powerless and feeling desperate, I never felt as desperate and powerless as in that moment. We couldn't tell him for an hour. So I sat at home. We sat there and we played Mario for about an hour, and I just pretended like nothing was happening. And then he got home and we had the conversation, and it was just as horrible as I thought it was going to be. But I'd spent all this time in my life working to help people and make my life better. And because of all of that work, I was able to help this kid. Eventually, I took a leap. I worked at Renison for 6 years, and this position opened up here as the director of an agency. I'd never done a job like this before. I was a counselor. I worked hands-on with people, but we'd sent tons of guys here, and I heard amazing things about this place. It really started to transform a lot of things for me. I got to be on the other side of it. I got to start working to train counselors that are going to help people. In this job, I have this really amazing opportunity. I get to do the clerical and the government stuff and the staffing stuff, but I also get to sit here and have clients come in and sit down and chat with me. And because I'm not a counselor, sometimes I get to have really genuine, authentic relationships with them. My life's transformed now, like from this place of being homeless and destitute and living under this bridge less than 13 years ago to being in charge of a place where I have the keys for it, where I have children that are dependent upon me, where I have a wife that doesn't want to leave me because I'm not a dirtbag. I have relationships with my family that I had lost relationships with. I'm a contributing member of society, and all of those unmanageabilities and consequences of my addiction are essentially gone. I don't even recognize that person. When I have to tell my story, it feels like I'm telling somebody else's story, which is almost a little saddening because it's part of my life, but also very liberating because it means that I don't reflect that type of lifestyle anymore. And the beautiful thing is I've gotten to commit my life now to helping other people follow that same journey. And not all of them make it. I have a funeral suit, unfortunately, that it's gotten some really good use, but I also get to watch people come back here that to the rest of the world would seem hopeless and a waste of time to invest in. And I watch them get their kids back, and I watch them become human beings again and have life breathed into them. I have kids. People always say their kids are their biggest, success or a marriage, but it feels like I have lots of kids, and getting to watch them all come back to life is just a really big joy. Everything that I've gone through, I wouldn't say that there was a purpose to it. I don't think there was a purpose of me living on the street or me having a heroin addiction, but I get to convert that into something really great. One addict helping another is without parallel. They identify with me. They know that I've been there. It's really difficult to trust somebody when they haven't been down that road. It's a really hard thing to understand. The rest of the world, they try to understand what it means to not be able to stop. But there's a lens that they're looking through. And that lens is that if I can sit in a bar and have 2 beers and I can put it down, then why can't you? So there's always this underlying morality kind of piece that comes into play, whether it's intentional or not. I think having that lived experience removes that for me. I get to hear these guys and understand that what they're telling me is authentic, that they wanted to quit, wanted to have a better life. And some of the traumas too. I mean, the traumas are, some of them I haven't gone through that these gentlemen have. A lot of these guys in this house, have been through sexual abuse or really severe physical abuse with family members. I came from an amazing family. I didn't have to go through those, but I went through all sorts of trauma on the street. It bridges the gap between me and them. I hear this really strange statement sometimes that they're lucky just to have a place. It always bothers me, because they're not lucky to have that. Like, this is Canada. We pay into this. We make sure that this is here for everybody. For me, it's not about that they're lucky to be here. I'm privileged to bear witness to them recovering. They're just like anybody else. If it was your grandmother and she was homeless, you wouldn't say she's privileged to be here. She would just have a place, right? We would look after her. We have a really involved program, probably the most involved program in Ontario for post-residential. Most post-residential agencies, when people graduate treatment, they would have a place to live, maybe a counselor just to do a quick check-in with, 8 to 4, and then there'd be house reps. Outside of that 8 to 4 hours, there may not even be counselors on site. We've augmented this program over the years. So it used to be a residential treatment center about 50 years ago. And then it became more of a housing program. And then 6 or 7 years ago, we converted it to post-residential. So we're only taking people that are graduating treatment and coming directly to us. Our goal is to do a slow integration back into society. With that slow integration, we have a ton of programming that's really mandated. When a client shows up here, in their first 30 days, they're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to go to school. They are required to do full-time programming with us, which include morning meditations, a program we call First 30, which in their first 30 days, they have to go to Oasis Recovery Society, which is a mix between vocation and education. So resume writing, going back to school, applying for jobs, and getting really integrated back into society. And then they do 2 meetings in the evening with us. One that's an alumni meeting where we bring the alumni back to share their experience, strength, and hope. And the other is a rotating schedule of self-help groups that come in and carry the message to the clients, 24/7 staff. Right now, I think we have 1.6 clients to 1 staff member, which is a really high ratio. And then we have a full-time case manager. The guys have to go and see him bi-weekly. He'll spend about 2 hours with them, planning for graduation, like long-term housing, setting them up for clients that have different forms of abuse. We have partnerships with lots of different programs in town, one called the Gatehouse, which is fantastic. We also have Dr. Jake Bobrowski. The clients will go and see him. He does a full breakdown. Most doctors you'll go and see and they do, a 15-minute session. He basically ignores everything that's ever happened, does a 3-hour session going through your entire life, and then starts from there. Addiction can look like bipolar. It can look like schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, if somebody doesn't tell you that they're using. So he starts from scratch. But the most important thing I would say that happens here wouldn't be the group sessions, it'd be the community piece. So we have 18 clients that live here, and they have to have dinner together. They go to meetings together. And anything that they do with each other is significantly more important than anything that we can do. We want to create an atmosphere where they're all supporting and caring for each other and not having us as the epicenter, because they're only here for 4 months. And when they graduate, I don't want them to be needing us to sustain them. I want them to graduate and be autonomous human beings, if that makes sense. I sit in an office that is about 15 feet away from the living room. The majority of the time, while I'm doing my clerical work, I leave the door open intentionally to lure people in. They poke their head in, they say, "Hey, Jordan," and then they walk into the office, sit down, and we have a conversation. And that's my favorite part of the day. I still go to a lot of meetings. I'm on a few boards for different charities. I like to be a service, I've dedicated my life to that. I kind of take the stance of that everything is borrowed, right? It's all borrowed now. I should have been dead at 27. So everything I have, time, money, family, whatever it is, it doesn't belong to me. It's something that's been given to me but for the grace of God. So I have a debt to pay. I find that once somebody's, had a spiritual experience and they've received something like that it oozes out of them where they want to help people all the time. So I sponsor a lot of guys. I have a home group that I go and set up and close down. I spend a lot of time with my family. A good day is when you don't pick up. A great day would be when everything turns to crap and you don't get high. Basically the standard for most of them right now. For us, a really good day as a counselor is when I get to see some sort of change. I'll have guys in this office that are working through something and resistant or unwilling to work through it or unable. But every once in a while, they have an epiphany or, they break. And sometimes that brokenness and that cry is transformative. Those are really great days, getting to bear witness to that. I just want them to get out of the way. Most of these guys have been swimming against the current their entire life. We just want them to float downstream and just let it happen. Seeing them show back up later on with like their kids. Some of them I've known, right? Through other agencies or seen them come into meetings, falling down, intoxicated. Some of these guys have lost custody of their kids, and getting to watch them just be reborn and taking their lives back, changing not only their lives, but their kids' lives and their families' lives. It makes me exceptionally proud to get to be part of that. To know that we had any sort of effect on that guy is just a really beautiful feeling. I just say that this is the only program that I know that's like this. I've been in this field for over a decade. The big piece that seems to be missing is continuum of care. There's a lot of treatment centers, a lot of withdrawal management centers, and there's lots of housing programs. But there's not a lot of pre-treatment and post-treatment centers that are viable. So the gap keeps happening. People who are willing to get help who go to withdrawal management, and then there's very little pre-treatment residential care. So people have this massive gap in between going from willingness in a withdrawal management center to treatment, and then when they graduate, they have no place to go. It's even hard to describe to people sometimes what we do. You'll say, "Oh, are you treatment?" I'll say, "No, we're not treatment." "Or are you housing?" "We're not housing." Well, we're post-residential care, which is essentially just a term I made up because there's this big piece that's missing in the community. If we were to take people and transition them, instead of just throwing them out of the nest, the success rates would be drastically different in this province. We'd have a really diminished homeless population, probably a significantly cheaper cost ratio too. We're rich for a penny, poor for a pound. We just keep triaging people instead of actually providing them with proper essential care that's needed in order to recover from the disease of addiction.